Word up, Brainiacs. Real quick heads up. Our charity that is being highlighted this month, the month of March, is Bake Their Day. Go to baketheirday.org to learn more about this wonderful organization. They're located in Guam, and what they do is it's a bakery where they focus on creating and providing birthday cakes for youth that are either in custody, treatment centers, residential centers, detention centers, just all those different places. These are young people in a situation in their life that's very, very tricky and difficult, and don't always get some of the little niceties that they would get if they were in a home where that were happening. So go to baketheirday.org. Become a Patreon donor this month. Go and make direct donations, and definitely share them on social media. 3 different ways to help out Bake Their Day. Now on with the show.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
One of the all-time favorite things I have is when you click on things and then wait 5 to 30 seconds for them to work. Really throws you off, you know, when you're used to a world where technology just always works 100% of the time, like the world I live in and that we all live in, right? Except that when it doesn't, you don't know what to do. So, welcome. Welcome. You've experienced this before, Amber?
Oh, yeah. I need that immediate gratification. In fact, I just threw a mouse away, and I was convinced that this lack of immediate movement was due to the mouse, and I was mistaken.
It's much maligned. The much maligned mouse. That's the name of the episode today. We're going to get to the bottom of this. What's going on Amber's computer? Grateful to have everybody joined today back on the Broken Brain. It's me, Dwight, your host, for talking about a very, very interesting aspect today of touching on some of issues psychologically, culturally, and as everybody knows, that is what we do here. We're talking about the novel Bliss Creek, written by Amber Willingham. And Amber, you've been kind enough to come on to talk about this, your debut novel. And as you had just told me, your second novel is actually coming out in April. And so
yes.
I imagine that's one of the reasons I get to talk to you, is because you're probably going around talking to people about your writing and stuff. And so lucky, hard work for you, and lucky for me, because now I got to read a good book, talk to a cool author person, and I'm going to get to read a second one once it comes out. So very, very exciting for me.
And thank you for having me. It's very exciting for me too. I'm honored to be on the show.
Well, it's a really fascinating novel about we'll get into a little more what it's about, but Bliss Creek refers to a certain zone in a very complicated new world, and a place that seems to be very tranquil and serene, and a protagonist who is going through some pretty interesting situation where she's trying to piece together mysteries regarding her own life. And I'm excited to talk with you about it. I enjoy it the book very much. But first, let's have you tell everybody a little bit about yourself. How did you get to be here at this point where you're writing cool fiction?
All right. Well, I'm an attorney by trade, and I practiced law for a little while and had kids, did all the things. And my husband got transferred to a different state altogether. And it's not really easy to pick up your law practice and move it to another state. In fact, by the way, it's impossible.
Speaking as someone in like with private practice, I assume, and building clientele and working by finding clients, and then you move somewhere else, unless you're like in some really bizarre niche where it doesn't matter where you live. I mean, that's my business in my therapy side, is like, if I was just going to move, I don't have any clients waiting for me somewhere else. Yeah.
No, you got to start all over. And in a place that was completely foreign to me, Houston, Texas, which is now home. So we decided that I would stay at home for a little while with the kiddos, and I didn't know where that would lead, but I stayed at home with the kids and I was trying to calculate. I think I was home for 10 years. So I have a decade, right? A decade of nothing on that resume. So I go from practicing law for however many years that was. I don't want to date myself here, however many years that was. And then I go stay at home with my kids, which was a huge privilege. I would not have given that up for anything, but it really was a different world. And I stayed at home and I wrote while I was staying at home with the kids. And that's where Bliss Creek came from. And that's where the Petroleum Wars came from. And that's where book 3 came from. I don't know what it's called yet, but we'll just call it book 3. My kids.
If you just kept that name, that would be a bold move. And you're like, this
It'd
is
be a
book
little
3.
confusing.
You know what? I like it. Book 3. We're going with
book
this.
3.
Especially if you're having. I mean, I'll be honest. Names are like a great. I'm sure there's a strategic thing of a hook there too, but they're very good names. Bliss Creek. I kind of want to know what's going on there. Petroleum Wars. Ooh, I want to know what's going on there. So I'm sure you'll go. Obviously, your track record, is quite good for coming up with names, but.
Well, yeah, and then there's a little juxtaposition there, right? I mean, you've got bliss, and then you have war. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on there. But so anyway, my kids grew up. It was very rude of them. I asked them not to, but
they won't stop. It's like they do it every
that
year, no matter what.
I know. And then they left.
Oh.
And I should think of that as a success, but and as far, hopefully they're not listening. As far as I am concerned, it was a huge success, but it was hard, and there you go, another career change, if you will. So I decided to dust off the old law degree and went back to work. However, when you go out and you interview for jobs with a 10-year gap on your resume, it's a little difficult, and I was 50. So it was hard. So I dusted it off and I began working for myself, and I started a law firm and decided, you know what? I'm going to publish these books. I'm going to pull these books out of this banker's box, dust it off, get the spiders out. And I went through the process of publishing, and I made huge mistakes with Bliss Creek. It was a very interesting process. But with Petroleum Wars, I have learned the publishing process. Well, I mean, not all of it, obviously. I'm still learning, but I'm not going to make the same mistakes again. I'll make new ones. And hopefully it will pan out a little bit better. I actually, the first book, I did not do an developmental edit, which was a mistake. I didn't know that I needed to do that. With this one, I'm doing a developmental edit, and I feel like it's going to be a little better with flow and so forth.
I think it's it's always the way with kind of creative endeavors. As we were just getting ready to record it, I'm just thinking about that when you're saying, like, here's how I feel about this one, and here I am, the reader. You're reading Bliss Creek. I'm like, this is really good. In fact, I will say this. Sometimes I give people a little look behind the curtain. When you're interviewing a lot of people and you have stuff to read, you get pretty good at saying, like, here's how I can get through a thing and get the gist in case of a time crunch. I never like to come to an interview without any prep of, and I've had guests tell me that they go to lots of interviews where people haven't watched the movie, or they haven't read the book, or they haven't read the whatever it is that they are doing or whatever at all. And I'm like, wow. So, but there are definitely times, and a lot of times I say this off air, so a lot of guests know, whatever. Anyway, but there are times where I'm like, this one I can't really speed read because I'm into it. And with fiction, it's a little harder to do that anyway. And I like to take the time. So for everybody out there, but I will say yours in particular, though, I will just say, since you brought it up and feeling like hyper aware of mistakes, I felt like, no, I can't really even speed through this one because it's interesting in each little part to read. And so it's funny from that, the person who you do the art for comes across and says, wow, this is amazing. And then as creators, I think we tend to look back and go, oh no, I see every little thing that I didn't like to, I would have done it this way if, kind of a thing.
Well, aren't we our own worst critics, you know? So I haven't read Bliss Creek in a while. I I
That would
really
kill me to go back and read something like that I had written, because I know I would be nitpicky.
Oh yeah, I'm going to tear it apart. I'm thinking about going back and having a second version where I have a developmental edit and just maybe have a little bit more flow with it. But it's exciting and it was fun. It was fun to write. I You and I were talking about a little bit about the titles. Bliss Creek, bliss. When you think about it, ignorance is bliss. And I wanted her to, and as you know, she's got amnesia. So our protagonist doesn't know who she is, and she has no memory, no recollection, and she's one of her friends at some point in the book says, "I think you're kind of lucky because ignorance is bliss," and Bliss Creek is the place that she lives.
Yeah. I keyed into that as well when you mentioned it, because bliss is not the same as happiness. It's not the same as satisfaction. It's certainly not the same as safety. Oftentimes we use bliss as a sense of euphoria. Sometimes when even an intoxicant state, right, of being like, oh, a blissful kind of like, or ignorance is bliss, or there's sometimes a self-medicating ring to the word of bliss when we're using it to say, I just want to bliss out for a minute, or something like, I think I just made up that term, but no one ever
I'm going to use
that
now.
Yeah, use it. You can use it in the, catch on in the world of,
Yeah.
Oh, if I read that in one of in book 3, if that's part of book 3, bliss out. But just make a little shout out. So no, but anyway, I feel like that is interesting because a lot of people, it seems like, and of course this develops as the story goes, is like a very active idea that this is not only something that it's like a little throwaway phrase in the world of the story you're telling. This is something that some people seem to feel is something to aspire to or even create. The ignorance is bliss kind of a situation, right? We want that. Yeah. We're not looking to actually deal or get into things or really solve problems as much as we are. The ignorance is actually what some people would prefer to have in some situations.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that in this zone, it's a zone, it's not a town or anything, because this is post-apocalyptic. This is, what's left of the world. The people that live there, they don't know what's outside of this. And, I grew up in suburbia and I raised my kids in suburbia. And as I was raising my children, I always wondered, what do they think is outside of here? What do they think and they do, by the way, do they think that everyone lives like this? Mm-hmm. No, this is a bubble. This is, in reality, my world and the world I put my children in is a bubble, just like Bliss Creek. The kids had no idea what was going on, in downtown Houston or in the Fifth Ward, or, they were clueless as to these things. And I would ride my bike. I rode my bike when I took the kids to school. We would ride bikes. And that was the image that I was getting was, look at this utopia that we have here. And just outside of this, it's not so pretty. Yeah. It's not so, it's a little dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I would make sure that my children had opportunities to go outside of our bubble and see what life was like out there through church groups or through whatever, and have that opportunity to give back a little. So the idea came from, me riding my bike in my neighborhood and thinking, just like 5 miles from here. Mm-hmm. It's not a war zone, but it's not pretty. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. You can relate to that. And I like how you created this but kind of bubble within a bubble with the story, because here, as this protagonist kind of, we the very opening, right? She's in the hospital and she's told there's been an accident and you had this random head injury that just somehow triggered amnesia, right? And then as she's trying to discover, well, why do I really not remember, and what is it that I don't remember? As you put it, so in this, it's the former United States, right? That's all split up into zones.
Yes.
And so the zone she's in, all she knows is like, it's nice and we just moved here. And that's basically all she knows. And so she's in a bubble. She doesn't even know what other people know. And as you just put it, not everybody knows what is it even like outside of where we are, but she doesn't even know if they know or what they know, if that makes sense. Because obviously some people have a one-up on her. And then is that information, and a lot of, it's an interesting highlighting of how information is power. Information gives you power and empowerment in your life. But then there's the kind of information that living where in the world we actually do live in, I can hop in a car and drive downtown and look around if I wanted to. Right. And do I know that I need to? Do I even have a concept that other people live in a way that is so completely different from me that we couldn't relate to each other without actually understanding each other? So yeah, it's very, it's a great metaphor for that kind of understanding, of the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that we are a society that is inundated with the news nonstop. And that is her society. When they turn the television on in Bliss Creek, and of course, in my head, I picture a 1970s television, a Zenith with the box around it. I don't know exactly what it would be. But
when Netflix or Prime picks this up, I'm thinking that's what it's going to look like.
With the shag carpet. That's what I envision. But it's all it is news. And it's nonstop news about what happens outside of Bliss Creek. So why would you ever want to leave?
Yeah. And which gets into a thing that she starts to question about her life in general, and I think is a question that a lot of us have with information that we come across now. Who's telling the story and why? What is the point or the goal of it, right?
Is it wag the dog? Is it real? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And is someone trying to placate someone, or is someone trying to stir someone up, right? Because we see the manipulative kinds of things. It's been, and just even with cultural and political things that are going on right now in the United States, it's quite amazing when something breaks through, because we do have the kind of overall, like, okay, at a certain level, something happens, everybody does notice it. And when things break there, I think one of the things that's the most amazing for me nowadays, if you try to be a person who's trying to look around and be informed and proactively and whatever, to find whole swaths of people who are like, I didn't even know this. What are you talking about? That's been brewing for 3 years. And it finally happened. And it's like, well, I didn't even know that it was happening at all, because without a real proactive effort, and I'm not going to say that that's never happened to me either. I'm just someone who is kind of like maybe even a little too plugged in because of this, the stress that can cause and things. That's just my personality. But, you come across, and I'll put it, take it out of the political realm, and I'll put it into something that's a little more fun, which is I saw some post on social media the other day where someone said, think of that star in that show that you loved when you were a kid that you think is not working anymore. Guarantee they're 8 seasons deep into a streaming procedural, drama on some platform that you just don't know about, and that their co-star is someone you think is dead. It's been working for 40 years in Hollywood still. So there's that, right? There's so much content and so much stuff out there. And then it takes a little more of a sinister and overwhelming bent when it's more like political, legal, social structure kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a matter of knowing, if you're going to go dig, what are you digging for, and how do you know that you need to dig for it? You don't really necessarily have that information unless it's flashed in front of you. Mm-hmm. Or, sometimes you just don't care. A lot of times I want to unplug, turn it off. I don't want to hear what's going on. Head in the sand kind of thing every now and then.
Absolutely, sure. And we can get at a point, And I know that people use that, I think, in a proactive way, sometimes in a healthy way too. I'm going to detach for this time. But then that can also become that ignorance is bliss feeling. Now I'm chasing detachment as if that becomes my primary coping mechanism, that can be a problem instead of just, you know what, this weekend or for the next few days, I'm not going to look at this and then I'll just catch up and be worried on Monday or something like that. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, when I do sit down and write, I have to unplug. I have to, especially if I have a deadline. Of course, all my deadlines are self-imposed because I'm self-published. But if I self-impose a deadline, I have to unplug. I have to turn off the computer, the phone, everything, and just sit down and write. And right now it was a matter of editing. This year it was a lot of editing. Well, this year it's February, but this year there was a lot of editing on Petroleum Wars, and I find I just I'm one of those people that says squirrel, butterfly, and I find my way back into the other part of the house and or watching the news or doing something that's totally irrelevant that all of a sudden had to get done, even though it's been 10 years. So I have to unplug, lock the door, sit down, and just do it. Just finish it. I'll allow myself a walk or something. But I find that it's so much more satisfying once that's finished, having unplugged, not just finishing it, but having completely unplugged from everything else. I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. I was curious, this leads into when you are writing something that is there's a lot of allegorical things, as we mentioned, for the world that we're in. And when it's also one of these that we're not talking like a dystopian, like there are some, I guess there's some like far flung 1,000 years in the future. I don't know. You're thinking Hunger Games, Silo, those kinds of things that are like wool, if it's the book anyway, but, where it's so unrecognizable from our culture now. And then there's the kind that are a little more like, this could be like next year. Well, that's a little bleak. Maybe let's give it a few more, but let's give
it a decade at least. Come on.
This is good. So it's not like we're living on Mars and stuff. It's like, okay, this is recognizable. This could be happening theoretically, right? If things line up in a certain way. And so I'm always curious when you're writing something that is that, close to the world that we live in, it makes it so much. It has more punch. It makes it more interesting, I think, with reader perspective. But as the writer, how do you balance that out? What do you bring into it? How do you decide, like, what of our modern world am I putting in here? Do you think about, like, I don't know, the how much is really, really metaphorical? And I don't know if is that too over the top, or is that, like, how do you balance that out? It seems like that would be quite tricky.
It's hard. It's hard because I have, and that's what stumped me on book 3 is that I could go robot. I could go AI on book 3. I could make this, sci-fi. I don't know that I want to. I want it to stick closer to a reality, closer to a, exactly like you said, to something that people can relate to. One of the things that I really wanted my books to have, and something that was very intentional, was that there are no computers. There's no cell phone. That is gone. That for them is the way of the past. Mm-hmm. And perhaps maybe AI came in and destroyed itself. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how the story will continue. I don't know if it's going to be a series or a trilogy. I can't answer that question, but I do know that it's very, very close to home, and it may very well be a little more close to home for people who are in war zones. The Petroleum Wars is very much a story of war zones, and it's also a prequel to Bliss Creek. So you learn how is ended up in Bliss Creek, why she has amnesia, and what exactly happened to her.
Mm-hmm. So you see this kind of telling of the story, and I really like that, and I like that has been a tool. I guess it's always been around, but it feels like as a culture of storytelling and movies, TV, books, have gotten better at using that kind of flashback, flash forward, prequel, to where kind of those lines are there to say this is a more interesting way to tell a story. Oftentimes, to jump in and get, and you do this very well, obviously, with the protagonist that you have created, which is that stories that happen in an interesting world with an interesting question of like, what would happen if this? They're only really interesting if they're about a person. Like, here's a person that's going through this world. It's not just, because otherwise everybody could just be like, oh, I had a great idea for a story. And it's like, great. The real idea of the story is who is a person going through, and the world building is really the backdrop for that, right?
Well, and you have to like the person. Your protagonist. It's important to create a character that people are going to like and want to protect or want to follow her and find out what happens to her. I think people like Iz. I like Iz.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she's, I think, a part of me. She's part of my daughter.
Yeah. I also liked I always love interesting nicknames. So I like Iz as a nickname for Elizabeth is pretty cool. I thought that was cool. And
thank you.
Also, I recognize that, I don't think this is a spoiler. It's in the first page or so, that when she hears the name Elizabeth, she immediately recognizes that she is that is who she is. Like she remembers her nickname before someone tells her, I think.
Yeah.
So there is a core concept of who she is. While she's still like reeling from from that. I also liked, by the way, and I've heard, when you see this portrayed, oftentimes amnesia is portrayed as someone being like, what's going on? Ah! But actually she kind of plays it like I think a normal person would, which is like, I'm supposed to know these people. I should wait and see what they say. I'm going to play this cool. Similar to how a normal human reacts when they meet someone they don't remember. I mean, she's alarmed, but she isn't, she holds back a little bit. She's a little cagey at first. And I feel like we start to see her personality and how she's reacting to the amnesia, even though she doesn't know enough about herself to tell us yet in the narrative. I thought that was very interesting.
Well, and I think I like that you noticed that, because I wanted her personality to be strong enough to, and her character and who she is, the person she is. I wanted it to be strong enough to peek through. And, it hasn't gone completely, because I feel like for some people it may disappear, but for her, it doesn't, because that her core is very, very strong.
Mm-hmm. What made you select amnesia? Do you have any kind of particular interest in amnesia, or did it just seem like this is the best way to get across this kind of information control kind of part of the story?
I don't know. I can tell you that there was this movie back in, I don't know, the 80s. Gina Davis was in it, and she had amnesia, and she had this family. She had gone on with her life, and she would do things, and they would say, oh, maybe you were an artist when you were, and she would then do something incredible with a knife, like chop a carrot, really, really fast, and go, oh, I'm sure artists did that. Well, I really liked the development of her character, and I wanted to put that in Iz. Because, as you read the book, you realize, she's got some skills that she's learning throughout this book. She's like, oh, I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah. Yes. And where she discovers some of the talents that she has with athleticism and things that would be muscle memory, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I've always wondered that too. It's an interesting thing. I think if anybody has watched enough fiction or read, with amnesia, we always kind of have a fascination, right? I'm like, what would I discover? It would be interesting to know. Would I discover that I was good at anything? It's like, wow, he's trying to record himself talking about culture points. I don't know. Yeah. What's going on? He's got strong opinions about Red Dwarf. I don't know if there's any like hidden talents that are going to come out that way, like a Jason Bourne kind of thing. But
yeah.
I think you also, though, play it in a very realistic way of like, oh, soccer. I have a vague, oh, okay, wow, my feet seem to know what to do kind of thing. And I think that's realistic to what somebody who is naturally athletic would do. One of the things that is also interesting to me is, and I'm curious how this was to write, ways to show her cleverness, right? Because she pretty quickly is on to the fact that people are controlling the flow of information, and that she is like, oh, I better not say this yet. I'll do this, that kind of thing, bringing in cleverness with and still maintaining the ignorance part of like, I don't have any reason to think that this one of my parents is up to something, but I do have a little bit. Do I trust them? I'm not really sure. Let me listen to that feeling. Anyway, I what did you find? How did you handle that challenge of trying to do that as she's discovering things?
I think that that fear, fear is a God-given gift to tell you, or fear and pain is your body's way of saying, be careful. She knows that she's a little bit afraid, but and if these people are good, or if these people mean her no harm, why is her body telling her you need to be a little cautious? And so that again is, I believe, a little bit of muscle memory, brain muscle memory of, and it's coming out that she is, she's just a little unsure. It's that sixth sense. For her, it's that sixth sense because she has amnesia. I think we'll discover later on, why.
Yes, and the way that she's so one of the things that's in this too is that there's a real story of like mystery and trying to find, because she is gathering clues kind of things. And because of the nature of how you've made it, a lot of those clues come from the reactions of people around her. When she finds, here's a box of my old stuff, and she sees how her mom reacts when she's like, oh, what do you do? Where did you get that? What are you doing? It's like, okay, they don't want me to know this or whatever, those types of things. So it's a combination of kind of external physical world clues, but then also the kind of internal psychological feelings and observations that she's having that try to make. Because you get the sense if she had her memory, of course, some of these things wouldn't be a mystery. It would just be like, where'd you put my shit? Is it in the shed? I bet you put it in the shed, didn't you? Or whatever.
Well, and that's exactly right. And it's funny because I relate more to Sarah, her mom. That's I get Sarah. She is, she's trying to protect her daughter, and she doesn't know where to draw the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you can share that a little bit with people, especially people who are going to read it. What did you try to put into that dynamic? Because I do think that sometimes when you have a protagonist where, let's see, what can I say? I think where, maybe they have people in their lives and the parents aren't 100% reacting perfectly. It's easy for stories like that to just make the parents villains or dummies. Those are the two kinds of parents I see most often in these kinds of things. They're either villains or dummies. And in this case, I felt you went for something more nuanced, much more nuanced than that. At least that's what it felt like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And she, I think that I wanted her to be the decision maker. I wanted her to be the one who calls the shots, really. And also she's a little detached because she has to be. And I get that. Sometimes we want to cater to our children and we want to give them everything they want, no matter how bad it might be for them. But she is withdrawn that part of her parenting and is just going with this is what's best. It may not be what you want, and I don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And I don't, and that's where we can get into both good and bad decision making, I think, as parents, right? Because there are times where it's like, we got to draw this line. And I think this happens especially as kids do get older. You and I are kind of kindred spirits about this of like, isn't it wonderful and it's a success to see them grow up and become these people? And then it's like, but I don't want them to go, I'm very much the same way. I think when you say like, oh, it's a success to see them go out on their own in this, and it's like, yeah, but if you like your kids, it's sad too, right?
Yeah.
You don't really.
Yeah.
And so to have that, I think it's like, because there isn't, for anybody out there who has older kids, there's not like a magic day to where it's like, ding, okay, all your decisions now. It's like you always worry about your kids, and yeah, exactly. You're all done. And so that's where we might fall into saying like, well, we're not going to talk about this anymore. When in reality, it's like, well, okay, I'm a whole human being, and we do need to talk about this, or you need to back off a little and do let me make a decision. And it's like, well, that's kind of true, but maybe I don't want to.
Well, and there's no parenting playbook, really. Yeah. I mean, there's all different, scenarios and books and theories on how to parent and what the right thing is to do. I'm not sure that in Bliss Creek they have that. And I don't know that Sarah had those external tools given to her. She just had to figure it out on her own, how to do this, how to parent this child, and in essence, how to save her. Mm-hmm. I get that, because I want my kids to have everything. I do. But is it good to give them everything? Probably not. Probably not.
Well, and you bring in something that I think resonates for a lot of people. As you mentioned, people oftentimes are either in war zones or people who are just in more complicated situations. And I think right now we're seeing, once again, I don't want to go down the road of predicting, what's going to happen post the, whatever, trying to make it sound like I don't want to be overly dramatic, but we're seeing a lot of complicated situations with real anxiety and real fear that people are going through now in various parts of the world, including in the US right now. And being like, okay, in a case like this, even, in this Bliss Creek, in the world of Bliss Creek, so you not only have the things that we can totally relate to as a parenting and just the difficulty of parenting a teenager and whatever, particularly if you don't see eye to eye on some things, maybe big things, whatever. But also, this is in a crisis. This is in a world in which, at least, as you said, not everybody knows, just even the not knowing. And in these characters, they have a little more knowledge with her dad being in a leadership position and being like, stuff is scary. And so we're still trying to make these same sort of relationship and parenting decisions in a time and a place where things are complicated and the rug could be pulled out from under us at any moment, and already has been maybe sometimes. And so I think like that's something that we sometimes don't think about when we don't have all the information. And sometimes in a kid's shoes, that's what it is. We don't know what the parents are coming from, right? Because of the complications of their own lives.
Exactly. And the parents don't have the luxury to let their child make certain mistakes, because that could mean the end. And I think that that's how it is in a lot of places in this world, is that they don't have the luxury of letting them, being lenient. Being lenient could mean death, and it's just too risky.
Yeah. I just recorded an interview with Elio Zermati. He's an author of a book called Goodbye Tahrir Square, which is just a true story of his growing up years from like age 7 to like 15 or something in Egypt in the 40s during civil unrest and civil war. And anyway, it just reminded me what you're saying. One of the points he made was that, you still are growing up. He's talking about having those formative years. It's like looking down and seeing riots and buildings on fire. And then you're going to go to school tomorrow if the school's open, and there's that girl that he had a crush on or whatever, and that you're right. Having this experience, and it's tricky. And I think that finding that balance is tricky to tell. And in the world that you're telling the story here, she still also, on top of all this, is like, I got to go to a new high school. And not only is it new amnesia-wise, because I don't know anyone because I don't remember anyone, but it's literally new, like most people don't know her either.
Right, right. In a world where you didn't go to new high schools, in a world where you don't move. Yeah. So it's a little more complicated than a transitionary location, because there isn't any transition.
Mm-hmm. Did you find, how was it to write as a teenager in the teenage mindset? Because once again, there are certain things that take a little more probably a little more importance of like, oh, I have this crush kind of forming. And at the same time, my whole world's a lie. I mean, and having those have maybe, different levels of importance than they might from a more grown person, if that makes sense, to be like, I'm gonna put the crush on hold for a minute. And I thought you captured the teenage mindset very well, but I wondered how you stepped into that.
Well, thank you. I guess maybe I might be very immature. I'm not sure.
Wow, you turned that right into not what I was trying to say.
No, I am, at the time that I wrote this, I had two teenagers, and I had a teenage daughter and I had a teenage son, and they're both completely different people. They were so different. And so, parenting them was, you couldn't do for my daughter what you did for my son because it wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. And so I think that getting into the mindset was easy because I was dealing with her and parenting her and everything that she thought was this huge dramatic deal. In my eyes, I'm like, that's really okay. We're gonna, I'll let actually a day from now,
right?
And I, would acknowledge those feelings and actually take them in and put them in is.
Yeah. I think it doesn't always land well. I think any of us who've read enough of like a kind of, especially if there's post-apocalyptic, especially if there's a young adult protagonist or whatever, we can all think of examples where it went really well and makes a lot of sense. And then there's other times where it's kind of like, okay, this feels a little more on the, and so it's a delicate balance. I'm impressed that you pulled it off where it was. Cause I think as an adult reader, the risk is of getting annoyed of like, okay, come on, are you really that into this? But also then understanding that it's like, oh, but there's the right amount of that to say, and then also it's not that interesting if you don't care about any of the other people and it's only about the mystery. You can go that way too and be like, but why do I care? Because they're not a real person. So good job is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's hard.
Oh, thank you.
Because there's a lot of really good authors out there who don't do it well.
Well, I really thank you very much. That means a lot to me. I think the hardest thing about writing Bliss Creek was the first person, present tense, no memory. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't pull from, I so many times wanted to pull from, I remember when in a time when or a history of a character. There were no histories of characters. Because, when you read books, you have a little blurb. There's always a little blurb telling the story of this person. There's no little blurbs here because she doesn't know anything.
And I thought you maintained that well too, because I think that sometimes that in amnesia stories, obviously the biggest mystery is like the lost memories. And when I think a mistake people can make in that genre is they could just have, just at the right moment, this comes in exactly when it's needed, too conveniently. It's almost like the Gilligan's Island coconut hits you on the head and your memory comes back, right? As long as it hits the same spot. That's, medically, I think that's how it works. But although none of they lost that in this new society that you built. They didn't know about coconuts being the cure for amnesia.
I'm going to have to throw that in there.
That could be in book 3. Anyway, but book 3, coconuts.
Many things that you're going to have in that book 3. Okay.
I just,
write this down.
Just throwing it out there. No, but anyway, But the thing is, I think it can be a mistake to do that. And when you maintain the frustrating reality of she just doesn't remember, it's not like it's magically going to come back when she needs it. And then the times where something does pop in, it's, then that makes that more meaningful. And I'm curious, because you do pick a time or two where it's like, okay, here's something, but it's random and it doesn't seem helpful at the time. And then it goes somewhere. How did you choose when to do that? Because like I say, people can do it too badly of like, wait, I walked by and someone said this phrase and it reminded me of the thing I'm going to need 10 minutes from now or whatever.
Well, I think that for the writing, it was just at a lull. It was at a point where I needed something to happen. And I also had already written the second book, which is the prequel. And so it was, I needed to pull some of that into the Bliss Creek. And I thought that, the opportunity would present itself in certain respects, and it presented itself in the writing, in the story, and what was happening at that moment. It just presented itself as a great place to insert a piece of the other book.
Yeah, it really came across because speaking as like in my my other hat here, working in the mental health world, that when you do have things happen, mental health symptoms, it's a big trope in any kind of fiction to where it's like the symptoms either intensify or go completely away whenever they need to. And you have to do some of that in storytelling, but you can do it really, really, really cleverly, or you can do it badly, or you can just kind of not do it at all and say, these are not convenient symptoms and they are going to make the story a little bit more inconvenient for my protagonist because they're real. And so when she did, like, for example, she does have an event where something happens and jostles loose there's a kind of a memory. But it doesn't relate to the things that are happening then, but it does become interesting and useful because of how people react to it too. And I noticed that as I was reading that and saying like, okay, the memory wasn't a magic fix for anything, but it was another tool for this clever person solving this mystery to use as a clue, and because of who she is, and she's clever. And I was like, man, that's good. I thought it was really
Thank
good.
you.
That's all.
Thank you.
This is most of the interviews me just telling you how much I liked your book.
I know. I need you to write all this stuff down and submit it.
Coconuts. Yeah, okay.
Coconuts. Yes, exactly.
I'm just so really, really grateful to be able to talk to you about it. And I want everyone to know where they can find you and follow your work and your upcoming book, as well as the best place to buy this book. Before we tell people that, I always like to ask if you would share with people a way that you would recommend as a good way to give back to the community around us and to help other people. Could be a nonprofit or a charity that you like, or it could just be a swell thing to do. What would you share with people?
I like to participate in charities that are very, very local and very helpful to the people around you, because it's hard for us sometimes, and you see that in the book too. It's hard for us to see that there are people suffering right in your neighborhood, or if not in your neighborhood, just right outside of it. There is a local charity that we have here. It's called Clothed by Faith, and they take gently used clothes, and I'm telling you, they are very particular about what they take. If you won't wear it, they're not going to give it to their people. It's got, no holes, no stains, no, concert t-shirts, but they clean them, they hang them up, and they let people who qualify come in and shop.
Oh, that's wonderful.
They'll put together a week's worth of clothing, and they work with local shelters. And when these shelters get families in, they contact and say, okay, we've got a kiddo who's this size, we've got a mama who's this size, and we will put together a bag and put a big bow on it and give that, so they'll have shoes, they'll have underwear, socks, and outfits for a week.
Oh,
and it's really, it's a neat place. And they just do great work.
Cool. What's it called again?
It's called Clothed by Faith, it's in Katy, Texas.
That's wonderful. And because there can be, especially with things like clothes and shoes, there can be, you have to be careful with this kind of drives, because you don't want to send a message to people that it's like, hey, you want my garbage, right? So to have things that are wearable and useful and people can feel good about wearing, that's really wonderful. Thank you for
and especially kids when they're having to go to school and wear the same thing. You don't want to be made fun of it. You don't want your pants to be too short. Awesome. I don't want my pants to be too short.
I agree.
It's the worst.
Where can people, what's the best place for them to buy Bliss Creek, and where can they follow your work and all of that stuff? And when are we going to see Petroleum Wars?
So my website is www.alwillingham.com. I'm on Amazon, and Bliss Creek right now is on Simon & Schuster as well. And the Petroleum Wars is scheduled for release on April the 22nd.
And that either just happened or is about to. I haven't decided exactly when to put this out, but it'll come out near there as well. So that will be that will be something for people to look out for. Should we read? We should read Bliss Creek first, probably, right?
Read Bliss Creek first, because I think it's fun to have that. There's twists and turns that are going to happen in Petroleum Wars that you're going to go, oh my gosh, because it's been touched on in Bliss Creek.
And you know what? I have no prognosticator powers or any influence anywhere, but I will say this is exactly the kind of story that nowadays we're seeing. Nowadays, I think all of us are familiar with this thing where we'll hear about a Prime, Netflix, Apple TV somewhere will say, hey, this series is coming out based off a book. And then you always have that one friend who's like, I read that a while ago. Now, so I'm going to put this out there. Anybody out there listening, you could be that person who tells people I read this a while ago, because this is totally the type of story that I could see. Really, it resonates so much that I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, let's predict that when you see this turn into a movie or a TV series, everybody, you want to be the one who said, I already read that. So
I love that. I love that you spoke that into the universe.
A quick reminder for all the listeners, we do have our monthly charity of focus for the broken brain. As you know, we pick a local charity every month. The plug for that aired up top of the episode, because I'm just now kind of lining up all those and getting them ready. So you heard that up at the top, and make sure to go to their website and participate and donate. For anyone who is a Patreon donor to help the show, you, of course, get the bonus materials. You get to hear the additional episodes, our weekly history episodes of mental health. You get to see the video of our interviews in addition to the audio. And 50% of your donation will always go to the charity of focus that was highlighted in the month in which you joined. And that will continue as long as you are a patron. So if anyone joins this month, you will be part of that charity going forward every month and allow us to be as well. So, Amber, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for creating something so cool and so meaningful. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.
If you like paranormal, true crime, and some cryptids, or just anything weird, check out Ouch! Was That a Ghost? Brought to you by your host, Liz. You can find Ouch! Was That a Ghost on Spotify, Apple, or any audio platform. New episodes drop every Thursday.